Beneath the surface off the Ligurian coast, something feels wrong. The water is warmer than it should be, and the colours that should greet you here, deep reds and purples of 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐼 and the vivid yellows of 𝐒𝐻𝐿𝐼𝐼, have begun to fade. These are not tropical reefs. They are ancient coral forests, centuries in the making, and in the summer of 2026, they are dying faster than scientists have ever seen. Pull back from that dying crimson for a moment. Stand on the cliffs above Portofino and look down at the water. What you see is a postcard, the kind that has been selling the Italian Riviera to the world for over a century. Turquoise coves, limestone headlands, a little harbour painted in yellows and pinks. It looks pristine, it looks eternal, and almost nobody standing up here knows what is living directly beneath it. Drop below the surface off the Portofino promontory and the landscape changes completely. The rock walls don't just slope down, they plunge, and as they do, they grow. Gorgonian species like 𝐼𝐼𝐼𝐿 clavata and 𝐒𝐚𝐨𝐿𝐼𝐼 create complex, three-dimensional forests that structure the underwater landscape of the coastal, hard grounds. The phrase, three-dimensional forests, is not a metaphor. It is a structural description. These organisms grow upward and outward from the rock face, branching like trees, creating canopy layers and shadowed understories exactly as a woodland does on land. A mature Gorgonian fan can stand taller than a person. Beneath its arms, hundreds of species find shelter: nudibranchs, sponges, grouper, moray eels, tiny crustaceans that spend their entire lives in a single square metre of branching coral architecture. Then there is Corallium rubrum, red coral, a long-lived, slow-growing species that has been harvested, revered and traded across the Mediterranean for millennia. Some colonies at Portofino are centuries old, which raises an uncomfortable question about scale. What looks from the surface like an afternoon's dive site is, in ecological terms, an ancient living structure that took longer to build than most of the buildings in the harbour above it. Now, shrink the frame entirely. Stop thinking about the forest and look at a single polyp of red coral, smaller than your fingernail, translucent, rhythmically opening and closing to filter the passing water. That is the unit. That is the animal doing the work. Each one of those tiny mouths is capturing organic particles, converting them into calcium carbonate skeleton, adding a fraction of a millimetre to the colony every year. Centuries of that, multiplied across millions of polyps, produces a forest. It is one of the slowest acts of construction on the planet. Dense forests of both Gorgonian species are present within the Portofino Marine Protected Area in the Ligurian Sea. The Portofino MPA is the most studied site along this coast, the place where scientists have been monitoring colony density and mortality for decades. What those records show is that these forests are not simply scenic. The octocorals play a unique habitat-forming role in the coralligenous assemblages endemic to the Mediterranean. Remove the Gorgonians, and the entire vertical architecture of the habitat collapses. Every species that relied on that structure loses its home simultaneously, not gradually, which brings us to the water itself. The same warm, clear, tourist-friendly sea that makes the Riviera one of the most visited coastlines in Europe is now running at temperatures that would have been unthinkable here a generation ago. In summer 2025, sea surface temperatures in the Western Mediterranean were exceptionally high, with the Ligurian Sea exceeding 28 degrees Celsius, more than 5 degrees Celsius above the historical average. By late June 2025, the largest anomalies in the Western Mediterranean reached approximately 6 degrees Celsius above average in the Ligurian Sea, and early 2026 data suggests conditions have remained extreme. Here is what makes that number so significant for these particular animals. Tropical corals evolved in warm water. Their stress thresholds are calibrated for heat. The gorgonians and red corals of the Ligurian Sea evolved for cold, adapted to the dim, cool rock walls that drop below the thermocline. A 5 degrees Celsius anomaly is not a minor fluctuation for them. It is a physiological catastrophe. And yet, when you look at what is actually happening to these forests right now, the damage does not look the way you might expect. It does not look like the bleached white reefs you have seen in footage from the tropics. The destruction here looks different, stranger, in some ways worse. Understanding exactly what heat does to an animal that has no way to run from it requires understanding the difference between a coral under stress and a coral that is already dying. And that distinction is the key to grasping how much of this forest can still be saved. Before we go further, did you already know these coral forests existed right here beneath the Riviera? Or did this completely catch you off guard? Drop your answer in the comments below. Because what happens next, when heat actually hits these animals, is where this story gets genuinely unsettling. What happens to a gorgonian or a red coral when the water around it climbs past its thermal limit is not what you might expect if your only frame of reference is footage from the tropics. Tropical corals bleach. They expel the microscopic algae living inside their tissue, turn ghostly white, and, if temperatures drop in time, they can recover. Bleaching is a stress response. It is the coral equivalent of a fever. Unpleasant, potentially fatal, but reversible. What happens to Corallium rubrum and the gorgonians of the Ligurian coast is something else. These animals do not bleach, they necrose. The tissue itself breaks down and sloughs away from the skeleton, leaving behind bare white branches that look, frankly, like exposed bone. There is no recovery window in that process. Once the tissue is gone, the skeleton is dead infrastructure. A century of construction, dissolved in a single, overheated summer. That is what the 2025 to 2026 heatwave has been producing along the deeper walls of the Portofino promontory. And the distinction matters enormously. Because necrosis means the conversation is not about whether these colonies can bounce back. It is about whether they survive at all. The obvious question, once you understand that the surface waters are the danger zone, is, what about depth? The deeper colonies, below 40 meters, sitting below the thermocline where the water stays cold and dim, surely they are safe. That was the working assumption. Deeper water as refuge. And in previous heatwave events, it largely held. Mediterranean corals have been documented finding refuge below the thermocline, sheltering from high summer temperatures in deeper areas. But the thermocline is not a fixed wall. In recent years, the summer thermocline in parts of the Mediterranean has been affected by progressive warming, with heat penetrating to greater depths during intense marine heatwave events, meaning deep colonies that once sat safely below the thermocline are increasingly exposed to dangerous temperatures. The refuge is not disappearing, it is retreating. And as it retreats, it takes the protected zone with it, exposing colonies that had never before experienced dangerous warmth. Think about what that means structurally. Remove the gorgonian fans and the red coral colonies from those rock walls, and you are not simply losing a scenic feature. You are demolishing the architecture of the entire habitat. It is the difference between removing the furniture from a building and removing the walls. Every species that organized its life around the three-dimensional structure of that forest, the grouper, the moray, the crustaceans spending their whole existence inside a single branching arm, loses its home simultaneously, not gradually, not one species at a time. Running alongside those rock walls in the shallower sandy stretches between headlands are meadows of Posidonia oceanica, ancient seagrass beds that have been growing in the Mediterranean for thousands of years. These meadows are not incidental. They act as nurseries for the juvenile fish that eventually populate the coral forests, and they buffer water temperature in the near-shore zone. In 2025 and into 2026, those meadows are also under thermal stress, their leaf canopies thinning, their sediment-anchoring root systems weakening. Two ecosystems, failing in parallel, each one amplifying the other's collapse. Inside the Portofino Marine Protected Area, where fishing has been restricted for decades, fish populations are measurably denser than in the surrounding sea. That density is not just a conservation statistic. Those fish graze the algae and sediment that would otherwise smother stressed coral colonies, maintaining a marginal edge of water quality that in some orientations and at some specific depths appears to be helping certain colonies hold on. Not thrive. Hold on. The bare white branches on the rock wall, and just a meter away, a colony still intact, still filtering, still building at its fraction of a millimeter per year. The Riviera's coral forests are not gone, but the window in which they can recover is no longer measured in decades. It is measured in the decisions made across the next few summers, about emissions, about protection zones, about how seriously we take an ecosystem that most people standing on those cliffs above Portofino never even knew existed. Subscribe for more and watch the next one.